She thought marrying a rich man would be her happy ending, but what she walked into was a mansion full of storms no one warned her about, where the chandeliers sparkled like lies, and silence cut sharper than glass. Her name was Ayana, a dark-skinned black woman, beautiful like midnight soaked in moonlight, born and raised in South Atlanta, daughter of a seamstress and a bricklayer. She grew up with the hum of a sewing machine in her ears, the smell of pressing oil in her pillow. Smart, elegant, earned her architecture degree with a full ride, and a smile that knew how to hide a lifetime of struggle. When she met Daniel, she thought maybe, just maybe, God had sent her some peace. A white man, handsome, wealthy, high-powered attorney. He told her he loved her color, her strength, her roots. He said, "You're not like the others." And she, drunk on love, thought that was a compliment. They married fast. Silk dress, white flowers, her mama crying, not sure if it was joy or warning. And what came after? A mansion with cold marble floors, and people even colder. Daniel's mother, Mrs. Whitmore, opened the door with a porcelain smile. "Oh, so you're the bride?" She looked Ayana up and down, paused. "So exotic, different. My Daniel always did have a taste for the unusual. And that unusual just hung in the air, like a mosquito in still water. But Ayana," she straightened her back and walked in with her head high, carrying her dignity like a crown. She tried. Lord knows, she tried. She sat through cold dinners, smiled through sharp questions. "Where'd you learn to use cutlery like that? Anyone in your family? Been to prison?" And Daniel just gave nervous laughs. Changed the subject. Silence. That slow, deadly betrayal. Ayana felt it. That silence was louder than any insult. Then came the night of the grand Whitmore Gala. Family tradition, they called it. All the old money, the old names, the old eyes watching. Ayana spent the whole week helping the staff, choosing dishes, arranging flowers, picking the music. She wanted to show she belonged, not as a guest, but as his wife. The night of the party, she stepped down the staircase in cobalt blue, skin glowing, hair pinned up like royalty. She looked like a queen from a place they'd never visited, and they saw her. Oh, they saw her. Smirks, whispered giggles. Then Mrs. Whitmore's voice cut through the room like ice water. "Darling, could you bring more champagne to the guests? I assumed you were one of the help." In that simple little dress, silence. Ayana stood frozen. The waiter turned to look at her, unsure. Daniel turned away. She clenched her fists, felt her nails press into her palms, and smiled, a smile that bled inside. She said nothing. Not then. Because a strong black woman learns early. Sometimes silence is the seed of the storm that's coming. And that night, she made a vow. The next glass she'd serve would be a cold dish called revenge. Something inside Ayana died that night. But something else, something ancient, was born. A spark, a fire, a slow-burning storm wrapped in silence. She began moving through that mansion like a quiet scout on enemy land. Not afraid, just watching. She noticed everything. The way people looked past her. The paintings. Not a single black face. The smiles that never touched their eyes. And Mrs. Whitmore, that silver-haired queen of shade and poison. She kept acting like nothing had happened. Morning tea, fake compliments. "You're so well-spoken, Ayana. One would never guess you came from public school. Daniel always liked something different. But you, my dear, are truly from another world." Always with that same smile, the kind that shines like pearls, but cuts like razors. Ayana kept her cool. Not for them, for her. She knew what it cost her to be there. But she didn't forget. Didn't forget being mistaken for the maid in front of that whole party. Didn't forget Daniel's silence. So she began digging. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. She started with the house documents, then bank statements, family files. Turns out, Mrs. Whitmore didn't have as much power on paper as she liked folks to think. And then, one gray Tuesday, Ayana found it. Tucked away in a drawer no one had opened in years. A letter. Old, yellowed, written in the careful hand of Daniel's late father. It was a secret will, it said. If Daniel married for love, real love, he'd inherit the most valuable part of the estate, a private wing of the mansion, antique paintings, rare wine, a trust fund. But if his wife was ever deemed unsuitable by his mother, he'd only receive half. It was a trap, a quiet, cruel trap. Ayana stared at that letter, and the truth hit her like cold water on bare skin. This wasn't just about racism in pearls and perfume. It was about power, control. Mrs. Whitmore wasn't just being mean. She was trying to drive Ayana out, so Daniel would lose everything and come crawling back home. But Ayana, she was the daughter of a black woman who survived segregation and still found ways to smile. She wasn't going anywhere. That night she walked into Daniel's office, letter in hand, eyes dry, voice calm. "Did you know about this?" He hesitated. "Ayana, it's not what you think." She raised her hand. "Just answer me. Did you? No?" Silence. Then he nodded. "Yes, but I didn't think it would matter." She laughed once, dry, hollow. "It matters, Daniel. Every look, every comment, every silence. And now, it matters more than ever." She placed the letter on his desk, turned, walked away, let the echo of her heels fill the hallway like thunder. Because from that day forward, she wouldn't beg for respect. She'd take it. And when the fall dinner came around, she would sit at the head of the table, even if it was the last thing she did. The days after that letter moved slow, like syrup sliding down a cold plate. Daniel tried to explain, to justify. It was just my father trying to protect the family. Ayana didn't raise her voice, didn't throw nothing. She just looked at him like she was seeing a stranger in her husband's skin. "But protect who, Daniel? From me?" She walked out of the room, and that was the first time Daniel noticed. She no longer walked like someone in love. She walked like someone building a plan. See, Ayana had spent her whole life being the only black woman in the room, in classrooms, in offices, in luxury stores where they watched her like she was theft wrapped in melanin. But now, she wasn't going to shrink anymore. She started showing up different. No more blending in. She wore her hair big, her lipstick bold, and when Mrs. Whitmore introduced her as Daniel's wife, Ayana would step forward and say, "Ayana Whitmore, licensed architect, owner of Whitmore Interiors, by the way. Pleased to meet you." It made some of them squirm. But power, true power, it don't whisper. It hums. And yet, the mother-in-law still played her elegant little games. One day, Ayana came downstairs for breakfast and found the staff had already cleared her plate. Another day, a guest mistook her for the decorator. But Ayana, she was collecting each insult like receipts. Then came the charity event, Mrs. Whitmore's pride and joy, her annual soiree to show the city how generous the family could be. Journalists, politicians, society wives, everyone was coming. And that's when Ayana made her move. She offered to help coordinate the interior decor. Mrs. Whitmore raised a brow. "Oh, you decorate now?" Ayana smiled soft. "I build, I design, I create. It's what I do. And your donors deserve beauty, don't they?" And so, she was given a budget. Small, ridiculous, really. But baby, a black woman knows how to take crumbs and make cornbread. She transformed that ballroom into something divine. Afro-modern art, handcrafted installations, gold-toned uplighting against deep brown velvet. There were Yoruba masks and black-owned floral arrangements flown in from London. Mrs. Whitmore nearly choked when she saw it. "This is quite ethnic." Ayana smiled, calm as ever. "This is luxury." And the guests? They loved it. They walked through that room like it was a museum, took photos, asked about the pieces, wanted to know who curated it all. By the end of the night, a black city councilwoman pulled Ayana aside and whispered, "Don't ever dim your light in this house, baby. They better learn to wear sunglasses." And oh, Mrs. Whitmore saw it. She saw the room shifting, saw Ayana blooming in a place meant to choke her. That night, after the last guest left, she cornered her in the hallway, voice low, eyes tight. "That will be the last time you embarrass me like that." Ayana didn't flinch, didn't blink. "That wasn't embarrassment, ma'am. That was excellence. And if you don't recognize it, maybe you're not fit to be the face of this family anymore. That silence between them, it cracked like thunder. And as Ayana walked away, the look on Mrs. Whitmore's face said it all. She was no longer dealing with the maid. She was dealing with the future matriarch. There was one room in the mansion Ayana had never been invited into, tucked down a narrow hallway, past 2 locked doors. They called it the portrait room. Family history lived there, they said. Paintings of the Whitmores going back to colonial times, bloodlines, names, faces. Ayana asked Daniel once about it. He said, "You wouldn't find it interesting." And that was the last time she asked, until one night she caught a maid, sweet old Miss Ruthie, coming out with a tray of silver polish. Ayana paused. "They still keep it locked?" Miss Ruthie looked around, lowered her voice. "It ain't locked for cleaning staff, just for you." That hit Ayana like a cold slap. The message was clear. You married in, but you don't belong in this family's legacy. And baby, that's when Ayana made her decision. She waited until the house was empty. Daniel was on a business trip. Mrs. Whitmore out at the country club. She walked barefoot through the halls, silent as dusk, slipped a copy of the key from Ruthie's cleaning cart, and turned the knob. What she saw? Dozens of oil portraits, men in dark suits, women in pearls, blue eyes, pale skin, the same jawline over and over again. She walked slowly, scanning them, until she found the corner wall. A line of paintings labeled, "The Wives," wives of Whitmore men, through generations, all white, all posed the same, hands folded, chin lifted, as if saying, "We belong here." And that's when she saw it, an empty frame, hung carefully, centered, a nameplate already fixed beneath it, Ayana Whitmore. But the canvas? Still blank. Ayana stepped closer, heart thumping. The truth settled on her like dust. They had already prepared her frame, but hadn't painted her portrait, as if they were waiting to see if she'd earn it, or leave before she could. Her fingers touched the wood, and she whispered, "You were never gonna hang me here, were you?" She stood there a long while. Then she took a gold lipstick out her purse, and right there on that blank canvas, she wrote one word, "Enough." Because legacy ain't just who paints your face on a wall. Legacy is who you become, despite the wall. And as she turned to leave, the door creaked, and someone was standing there, watching. Ayana froze. There, standing in the shadow of the doorway, was Mrs. Whitmore. Her pearl earrings caught the light like 2 tiny knives, and her eyes, cold, hollow, almost proud. "Curiosity," she said, stepping in, "is a dangerous trait, Ayana." Ayana didn't flinch, didn't lower her gaze. She'd already stood too long in her own shadow. Now she was ready to face hers. "So is arrogance." Mrs. Whitmore smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She circled the room like she was giving a tour. "These women," she said, gesturing at the portraits, "they understood their place. They understood tradition. They didn't challenge it." Ayana stepped forward, voice calm but strong. "They also didn't look like me." Silence. The air between them stretched tight. "Exactly," Mrs. Whitmore whispered, then louder. "Do you know how hard I've worked to preserve this family's image? My husband built this legacy with discipline, with structure, bringing you into this house." She shook her head. "Daniel never understood what it cost me." Ayana's jaw tightened. "And what do I cost you, exactly? Truth? Growth? Reality?" Mrs. Whitmore's voice dropped low. "I see how the world looks at you, how you bring attention we didn't ask for, eyes we don't need, and every time you walk into a room, you remind people this family bent its bloodline." Ayana took a step closer. "No, what I remind people is that your bloodline ain't as pure as you pretend. It's just as flawed, just as frightened. And now, it has to share the throne with a dark-skinned black woman." Mrs. Whitmore's lips trembled, but she said nothing. Ayana turned to the blank canvas again, the word, "enough," still shining in gold. "You had your era," Ayana said, "but it ends here." She walked out, left the door wide open behind her. Because some rooms don't deserve to stay hidden, and some legacies only change when the truth walks in, wearing heels. The next morning, Ayana sat alone on the garden terrace, sunlight warming her skin, notebook in her lap, thoughts sharp as razors. She didn't sleep much, didn't need to. Something in her had awakened. The part passed down from women who scrubbed floors while dreaming of thrones. She was no longer trying to belong. She was preparing to lead. That's when Ruthie, sweet, loyal Ruthie, approached, hands trembling, eyes filled with something like fear and hope. She handed Ayana an envelope, old, yellowed at the edges. "I wasn't supposed to show you this," Ruthie whispered. "But your mama didn't raise no fool. You got a right to know what they hid." Ayana opened it slowly. Inside was a second will, another document from Daniel's father. But this one, handwritten, unofficial, hidden. And it said, if Daniel's wife proves herself not by society standards, but by strength of spirit, integrity, and the ability to protect the Whitmore legacy from corruption, she shall inherit control of the estate, regardless of race, class, or bloodline. Signed, dated, witnessed by Ruthie herself. Ayana's breath caught in her throat. They never filed it, never honored it. Mrs. Whitmore had buried it, along with every truth that didn't fit her image. Ayana looked up at Ruthie. "How long have you known?" Ruthie wiped a tear. "Since before the wedding. But I had mouths to feed, baby. A roof to protect. I'm sorry." Ayana reached out, held her hand. "You don't owe me an apology. You just helped me rewrite the ending. Because this changed everything." Now Ayana didn't just have strength, she had proof. And when power is backed by paper, the whole table flips. She folded the will, slipped it into her purse, looked toward the mansion like a woman looking at a kingdom ready for a new queen. But before she could rise, she heard a voice behind her. "Daniel, what are you doing with that?" She turned slowly, met his eyes. "I should be asking you the same thing, Daniel. Why didn't you ever tell me this existed?" His face went pale. "You weren't supposed to see it." And just like that, she knew. Daniel wasn't just silent. He was complicit. And that betrayal, it cut deeper than every insult his mother had ever thrown. Ayana stared at Daniel like she'd never seen him before. Same man who kissed her palms when he proposed. Who whispered, "I love your strength," when they danced in their tiny apartment before the mansion swallowed them whole. Now, he stood there, sweat rising on his temples, eyes darting like a man caught in a web he helped spin. "You weren't supposed to see it," he repeated. Ayana's voice was ice and fire. "You mean, I wasn't supposed to know that your father saw me? That he chose me?" Daniel stepped forward, hands raised like peace could still be made. "Ayana, listen. My mother, she was grieving. She wasn't ready to accept all of it. I thought if I told you about the second will, it'd just cause chaos. I was protecting you." She laughed, not loud, not bitter, just tired. "No, Daniel. You were protecting your comfort, protecting her lies. Because if I ever stood too tall, you knew the house might shift in my favor." He dropped his arms, didn't deny it, didn't even try. "This was my family's home long before you, Ayana." That was the wound. Not the words, but how easily he said them. Like she hadn't bled to be part of that family. Like her love was a guest pass, not a claim. She stood, her purse still in hand. The second will tucked inside like a knife with her name carved in the handle. "Then let me make this clear, Daniel," she said softly. "Your family's home has rotted under chandeliers and pretty lies, but I'm done begging for space in a house I helped make better. Your father saw me, and I see myself now too." She stepped past him. No tears, no more second chances. Just the weight of every woman who's ever swallowed her pride for love that didn't love her back. And as she walked out the garden gate, he called her name. Once, she didn't turn. Because when a black woman walks away in silence, that silence shakes the earth. The next few days passed like thunder wrapped in silk. Ayana moved with purpose. She hired a lawyer, a black woman, sharp, seasoned, no nonsense. Together they reviewed the second will. It was valid, fully legal. And Ayana, she was now entitled to primary control of the Whitmore estate. The mansion, the art, the holdings, everything. But power don't come quietly. Mrs. Whitmore requested a civil conversation. Said she didn't want the media involved, didn't want the family name dragged. Ayana agreed. She arrived to that meeting not in beige, not in soft pastels like they preferred, but in deep emerald silk, skin gleaming, hair natural and glorious. She was the storm and the sunlight. Mrs. Whitmore sat on the edge of the antique chair like it hurt to be polite. "You've made your point," she said. "But you must understand. Appearances matter. Control matters. We can't just hand the legacy over to... Ayana leaned in, voice low, steady, final. "To what, ma'am? A black woman? A dark-skinned black woman who didn't beg your approval, who didn't fold under your pearl-clutched cruelty." Mrs. Whitmore blinked, jaw tightening. "This family is built on tradition." Ayana didn't smile. "Then it's time to build something new." She laid the will on the table. "You can either work with me or step aside. But I'm not leaving this house. And I'm not staying quiet." Silence. Tension curled around the room like smoke. Finally, Mrs. Whitmore stood. "You'll never be accepted." Ayana stood too. "You don't have to accept me. You just have to move." And she turned her back on centuries of whispered supremacy, on every microaggression wrapped in cashmere. She walked out with the sound of her own heels echoing like a war drum. Because this wasn't just about land, or money, or names carved in oak. It was about a black woman taking her rightful seat at a table where folks once tried to feed her scraps. And this time, she wasn't the menu. She was the owner. But just as she reached the stairs, she found a letter slipped under her door, with no return name. And inside, just 5 words. "He lied about the child." Ayana stared at those 5 words like they were written in fire. "He lied about the child." The paper was thick, elegant. The handwriting, feminine, sharp. She turned it over. No signature, no clue, just silence, heavy as truth. Her mind reeled back to every moment with Daniel. How he spoke about never wanting kids until things settled. How he flinched every time she mentioned adoption, or IVF, or baby names whispered into the dark. And now her body felt like it didn't belong to her. Her memories, her hopes, everything was shifting under her feet. She called her lawyer that same night. Find out everything, every asset, every payment, every name. And the next morning she got the file. There it was, buried under legalese and private transfers. A name, Elena Crosswell, an address in a quiet suburb outside Savannah. And next to it, a child, male, age 4, last name, Whitmore. Ayana's breath caught. Her womb had cried for a baby. She'd wondered if her skin, her dark, rich skin, was the reason Daniel hesitated to grow roots with her. But all along, there was already a tree, planted in secret, watered with lies. She didn't cry. Not yet. She drove, 3 hours south. No warning, no announcement. When she arrived, the house was small but warm. Yellow shutters, toys on the lawn. She knocked once, and when the door opened, there stood a woman, white, mid-30s, nervous hands, sad eyes. And behind her, peeking around her legs, a boy, golden curls, light brown skin, eyes that mirrored Daniel's too well. The woman whispered, "You must be Ayana." Ayana swallowed hard. "How long?" The woman looked down. 5 years. He said he'd never tell you, said he'd handle it quietly, until your marriage settled. Ayana looked past her, at the boy, at the truth. He didn't know her. Didn't know she'd held baby names like prayer beads. Didn't know how often she imagined holding life in her arms. But somehow, he smiled at her, a small, soft smile, as if he recognized something in her face. Ayana smiled back, and it broke something inside her. Because this betrayal? It didn't just come from Danielle's lies. It came from the dream he stole from her without saying a word. And when she got back to the mansion, Daniel was waiting. As if he already knew, she stepped into the foyer, face unreadable, and all she said was, "We need to talk, but not about us, about your son." They sat in the grand dining room. Candles flickered, silverware untouched. 2 wine glasses sat between them, full but bitter. Daniel tried first. "Ayana, I never meant to hurt you." She tilted her head. "You didn't hurt me by being human, Daniel. You hurt me by hiding your humanity, by robbing me of a choice." He dropped his gaze. "I thought if I told you, you'd leave. You wouldn't understand." She leaned forward. "Understand? I would have stood by you. I would have helped raise him, loved him. But you denied me that, because somewhere inside, you still didn't see me as a woman, worthy of motherhood in this family." Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it, because the truth was, in the silence, Ayana pushed back her plate. "So what now?" he asked. She looked him dead in the eye. Now I decide if this mansion is your home anymore, because control of the estate belongs to me, and the future has to answer to the past." He blinked. "You wouldn't push me out." Ayana stood. "I don't have to. You already pushed yourself out when you chose secrets over trust." She walked toward the door, paused. "But I won't punish the boy. He didn't ask for any of this. He will be part of this family. I'll make sure he's written into the estate. Legally. Publicly." Daniel looked stunned. "You'd do that? After everything?" Ayana turned. "Because I'm not like you. I don't erase people I love." She left him sitting at that long, cold table, alone, surrounded by portraits of ancestors who never imagined a woman like her would one day hold the keys. But outside the door, Mrs. Whitmore had been listening, hands shaking, because she knew what Ayana was planning next. And if that child was named in the will, the Whitmore legacy would never be hers again. The next morning, the mansion was quiet. Too quiet. Ayana woke before the staff, before the sun. She stood barefoot in the marble hallway, listening. And what she heard wasn't silence. It was tension, heavy, thick, like heat rising before a storm. She walked to the study. The original will and the second one both lay on the desk, proof of everything. And in the center, a single rose, red, fresh, but clipped at the stem. Ayana narrowed her eyes. It was a message. She turned to Ruthie. "Did anyone come in here last night?" Ruthie hesitated. "Not staff, no ma'am. But I saw her. She walked through the hallway like she owned the floor." "Mrs. Whitmore." Ayana's jaw tightened, because she knew what was coming. That night the family lawyer called, nervous, cautious. "There's been a challenge to the handwritten will. Mrs. Whitmore is calling it fraudulent. Says you forged it to gain power." Ayana didn't even blink. "Let her come." Because dignity doesn't flinch in the face of fear. It rises, and that's exactly what Ayana did. She called a press conference. In the garden, her mother-in-law never let her tend, wearing a gold linen dress that wrapped around her dark skin like the sun hugging the earth. She stood in front of cameras, reporters, society mouths, too afraid to speak, but desperate to listen. And she said, "I married into this family with love in my heart, but love without truth is a cage. I have been disrespected, dismissed and discarded because of the color of my skin and the strength of my voice. But I am here. I am not leaving, and I will not let this family erase a child, nor silence a woman." Gasps rippled. She wasn't just reclaiming the estate. She was declaring legacy for herself and the boy. Inside the mansion, Mrs. Whitmore stood by the window. Her hands trembled, not from weakness, but from rage, because for the first time the story wasn't hers to control. And that night, a fire alarm blared. The study, smoke, the corner where the wills were stored, blackened, scorched. But Ayana was already one step ahead. She opened her safe, pulled out copies, originals stored off-site, video records, witness testimonies. She turned to Ruthie. "Let them burn the past if they want. I already planted the future." But when she turned back to the hallway, Mrs. Whitmore stood at the edge, eyes wild, and in her hand, a framed portrait, the empty one meant for Ayana, smashed, shattered. Ayana stepped forward, calm as a hurricane's eye. The broken frame lay between them, glass in pieces, splinters glittering on the floor like fallen stars. Mrs. Whitmore's voice cracked like ice breaking in spring. "You will not destroy what we built. You think this family is yours now? You think your skin makes you worthy of our name?" Ayana looked down at the shards, then at her, and what she said wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of every mother, sister, and grandmother who ever swallowed rage to keep breathing. "My skin is not what makes me worthy. My strength is. My truth is the fact that I've walked through fire and still came out with grace in my hands. That makes me worthy." Mrs. Whitmore shook her head, voice rising. "You're not a Whitmore. You're a mistake that got too bold." Ayana stepped close, so close she could see her reflection in the woman's eyes. And you're a mirror that's cracking. Because for the first time, you're looking at a woman you can't control. Silence stretched, thick, final. Then Ruthie entered, breathless. They've ruled. The board, the lawyers. They upheld the second will. You're now the legal executor of the Whitmore estate. Mrs. Whitmore staggered back, as if the ground beneath her had shifted. Because it had. Her power, her image, her crown, gone. Stripped not by anger, not by revenge, but by a woman she thought was too dark to matter. Ayana knelt, gathered the broken frame, and whispered, "You broke the glass, but I'll still hang the portrait. Because that, baby, is what true power looks like." And as she turned away, the boy, Daniel's son, stood at the top of the stairs, clutching a toy car, looking at Ayana like she was the only steady thing in a house full of ghosts. He called out one word, soft, unsure, but it melted something inside her. "Mama?" Ayana looked up at the boy on the stairs. That one word, "Mama," hung in the air like a prayer caught between heaven and earth. She didn't move, didn't breathe. Her heart was breaking open and blooming all at once. He walked down slowly, clutching that toy like a lifeline, eyes wide, searching, and behind him, in the shadows of the hallway, Daniel stood, silent. Ayana crouched, arms open. She didn't say yes, didn't say no. She just let the boy come to her. And when he did, when his tiny arms wrapped around her neck, warm and trusting, she held him like he'd always been hers. Because maybe, in some higher truth, he had been. Not born from her body, but pulled into her story by something deeper. Daniel spoke. "He saw your picture in the newspaper. Said you looked like someone who would keep him safe." Ayana didn't even look at him. She was too busy memorizing the feel of the boy's arms, the softness of his curls against her cheek. "What's his name?" she asked. "Caleb." She smiled, held him tighter. "Caleb means faithful." Daniel nodded. But he wasn't part of the moment anymore. This wasn't about him. Not anymore. Ayana carried Caleb up the stairs, past the cracked portraits, past the scent of smoke that still lingered near the study. And when they reached her room, she sat him down gently on the bed. "You hungry, baby?" He nodded. She rang for Ruthie, asked for pancakes, syrup, strawberries, a feast for a prince finally seen. And as the boy laughed, Ayana realized something. The house didn't feel cold anymore. Not because it had changed, but because she had claimed it. Room by room, truth by truth. And in the quiet hum of that moment, as she braided Caleb's curls with fingers that had once longed for a child of her own, she whispered, "They tried to write me out of this family, but I just became its future." That night, Mrs. Whitmore left the mansion. No goodbye, no apology, just the echo of heels fading into history. And on her way out, she passed Daniel in the front hall. Didn't look at him. Just said, "You lost a wife. She gained a kingdom." 1 month later, the house was alive. Not just with sound, with soul. Laughter from Caleb, fresh paint on the walls, Sankofa sculptures in the foyer, family photos framed in rich mahogany, dark faces glowing under soft light. Ayana stood in the portrait room, alone, but not lonely. The blank canvas still hung on the center wall, but today it would be filled. She had commissioned a black woman painter from Birmingham, her sister who understood texture and memory, who painted skin like it held galaxies. The portrait arrived wrapped in velvet, and when Ayana unveiled it, the room shifted. It showed her sitting, proud, poised, with Caleb standing at her side, her hair in a crown of coils, a soft smile playing on her lips, strength in her posture, warmth in her eyes. No pearls, no pretense, just power, real power. Ruthie stood behind her, teary-eyed. "You sure you want to hang it?" Ayana nodded. "It's not about me. It's about every black woman who was told she didn't belong, and every child who needs to see what dignity looks like in a frame." She hung it herself. No staff, no ceremony, just quiet victory. And as she stepped back to admire it, she heard footsteps. "Caleb!" He came running in, holding a small toy hammer. "Can I help too, Mama?" She smiled. "You already have, baby. You already have." But just as they stood together, basking in that moment, the front door creaked open. A messenger, letter in hand. No return address. Ayana took it. opened it, read it. One line. You think the fight is over, but blood remembers. And underneath, a seal. Whitmore. But not the mother. Not Daniel. Another heir. Long hidden and coming home. The letter shook something deep. Not fear. Not anger. Clarity. Ayana read the words again. You think the fight is over, but blood remembers. It was signed with a name she didn't recognize. Julian Whitmore. She showed Ruthie. Ruthie paled. Julian. That's the uncle. Estranged. Daniel's father's younger brother. The one they said disappeared after the estate was contested years ago. Ayana's breath slowed. Another ghost. Another man with a claim. She knew what this was. A last-ditch effort to claw back the crown she now wore without asking permission. But this time, she wouldn't play defense. She'd stand in the center, like the queen she'd become, and face the storm. She called her lawyer, prepared documents, secured the estate, named Caleb as heir, in public, with the press present. No more secrets tucked under rugs soaked in shame. A week later he arrived. Julian, tall, white, older, hair silver, suit expensive. He walked into the mansion like he still owned it. Ayana met him at the base of the grand staircase. He offered a handshake. She didn't take it. You've made quite the name for yourself, he said, voice smooth as old bourbon. But names fade. Blood endures. She raised an eyebrow. Then maybe blood needs to learn some manners. He smirked. This estate was never meant for outsiders. Ayana's voice was a blade wrapped in silk. And yet, here I stand, not just inside, but above the fireplace. She led him to the portrait room, showed him the painting. She and Caleb side by side, the gold frame glowing under the chandelier. Legacy, she said, isn't what you're born into. It's what you survive long enough to reshape. Julian stared. His smirk faded. He knew then the house had changed. Its heartbeat now matched hers. And in that silence, he turned, walked out without another word. Because some men know when the story no longer belongs to them. That night, Ayana stood by the fireplace, the same one where they used to gather and ignore her. Now her portrait hung above it, in the center, in full view, and below it, Caleb played on the rug, safe, seen. Ruthie brought her a cup of tea, laid a hand on her shoulder. Your mama would be proud. Ayana smiled. She's in this house now, in every wall, in every breath, because in the end, baby, they said she didn't belong in that house, but now her name was etched in the deeds. Her portrait crowned the hearth, and her love rebuilt the legacy they tried to bury. She wasn't the maid. She wasn't the outsider. She was the woman who turned their fire into a throne. If this story touched your heart like it touched mine, leave a word below, baby. Aunt Grace is always here, with stories for souls that been through the fire and came out shining. The end.